Thank you, Hudson. Always hard to follow Hudson, but I'll do my best. So my name is Stu Rabinowitz with Socrata. I think we have a slide.
A slide.
Thank you. I am a director of our federal partner program at Socrata, and so we are the world's leader in open data and open performance. And really what that means is we help agencies and governments all over the world to release their data out for use, whether it's for internal consumption or external consumption. And what I wanted to take a few minutes to talk to you about is really about the culture that is changing, I think, in open data and open performance. And what you can see here, these are just our customers, but the open data explosion worldwide, and it is a worldwide phenomenon. We have customers in Australia, we have customers here in DC, we have customers in Seattle, I think every continent except for Antarctica, but they'll figure out how to do an open data portal probably in Antarctica one of these days. You know, it's really a explosion of data. In London now you can really anticipate bus schedules. We've all seen in New York, my kids in New York publishes a heat map with rats around restaurant inspection data. So it's a pretty, I don't know, a pretty nasty map, but it's kind of fun to look at. So it really is a cultural change of releasing data. You have lots of cities from Los Angeles to New York, NGOs like the World Bank releasing how they're spending dollars out to the World Development Organization, and then the federal organizations like NASA and the White House, and CMS and CDC, who are publishing really important data that's out there around diseases or open payments. Is a very interesting set of data that's out there today. And if you needed more convincing about sort of the cultural shift that's happening, just within the last couple of days we saw Michael Bloomberg give money towards helping mid-tier cities release data and to get into open data and to really drive better data-driven government, as well as in the last month or so, Johns Hopkins has actually established a center for open data and open performance and data-driven government. So the culture is slowly but surely changing, and I appreciate you all giving me the time today, and I encourage you to do what you can to help change the culture. Thank you.
So talented with technology. Fortunately, there's only one button I think that I'm supposed to touch on this thing, so we'll see how it goes. Well, I want to invite our panelists for our first panel up. We are going to kick off this discussion with a series of success stories. So invite my crew up. Wherever you guys want, you can grab a stool. Sorry, somebody told me not to point these at the wherever you guys would like to be. You can spread them out a little bit.
If I fall off, don't worry, I won't expect you to catch me.
Let me get back to you, and I'm just going to reach past you. I'll stay standing. All right. Well, I'm so accustomed at these events to having like a really formal lectern, and so I'm very accustomed to having to read off everyone's bios. But this is such a great, comfortable space that I thought instead I'd actually ask each of our panelists to tell, in their words, tell us all a little bit about themselves. Carrie, would you mind starting?
Sure, fine.
You get the mic.
I guess, well, am I really speaking? Is it on?
If it's red, it's not on.
If it's red, it's not on.
It's this little bit.
How about that? How about that?
Yeah.
All right. So it feels sort of weird. I'm an accountant by trade, so I'm not used to being up here being a comedian. Anyway, we'll start off the day and have actually my bio includes a little time at OMB. I was the branch chief of financial standards and grants, and in that role I oversaw FADS and the CFFR. So FADS is from an oversight point, Census actually did the work, but I knew a lot about it from that role. And in that role, if you're not familiar with FADS, that is the Financial Assistance Award Data System, and the CFFR, which I have a copy of it, is the Consolidated Federal Financial Report. And if you think about it, it was one of the first pieces or first collection of spending data in a central location. And I'll go through that a little bit later. I later worked on USA Spending, the legacy system, not the one that's recently been launched, over at OMB. And I'd like to give credit to the one that's been launched, because it was not easy in the beginning, and it still is not easy. So kudos for all those trying to make data open. And then most recently, I worked with open data at the Recovery Board. First, I was the Assistant Director of Data Analysis, and now I am the Director of Accountability. So I think I'll turn it over.
Hi, my name is Camille Klimlin-Tooten, and I serve as Counselor to the Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary, we call her the PDAS, for Water and Science, Jennifer Gimbel, at the Department of the Interior. I was just telling my colleague Jerry that you can definitely tell this is not a government event because it's a little too hip for me.
You're dressed appropriately.
So the Water and Science Hallway oversees the Bureau of Reclamation, the United States Geological Survey. And what I'm going to talk to you about today is this initiative that we're working on called the Open Water Data Initiative. And in my past life, I was in the legislative branch. I worked for the House Natural Resources Committee for 8 years on the Natural Resources Committee, which is the authorizing committee for the Department of the Interior. So thank you again for the invitation.
Hi, thanks. My name is Rick DeLapp, and I am the Interagency Program Manager for a program called Recreation One Stop, which integrates recreation data and reservation services for the United States Forest Service, the National Park Service, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, amongst others. I didn't start this way. I actually have a degree in botany, and I was a park ranger at Yellowstone and Zion for many years before I stumbled upon recreation.gov and became a web program manager and data manager. So it's a little bit unusual for me too, and I like the atmosphere here. Anyway. I'll go into more later.
Great, thank you. So our panel, we're going to focus first on sharing a little bit of sort of concrete information about the particular open data projects that each of our colleagues are working on right now. They're going to give you an overview so that you can have a really good image of what the project is, and then we'll start delving into sort of this business of cultural resistance and strategies that they came up with to overcome that. When we get to that point, I want to encourage you to listen for a couple of things. We all know that legislative authority, legislative power helps, but a few other things about cultural resistance. Keep your ears open for issues like having really strong support and vision from your top leadership. Listen for things like building a really powerful group of stakeholders. And lastly, one of those stakeholders almost always has to be a really good data geek. You gotta make friends with your data geek. Buy them whatever beverage they want. Otherwise, you might have a little bit of a harder time pulling this off. So, Camille, will you start us off and talk a little bit about your project?
So I was going to talk about the Open Water Data Initiative. It is part of the President's Climate Data Initiative. Jerry knows this better than I do. But also it's part of the Open Data as part of the federal government. So as specifically to open water data, and to put it in context, there are 9 different federal agencies, and within those departments, and within those departments, 27 different agencies that have water as part of their mission. So the data is collected as different, it's for differing missions, and it's interoperable. For most of it is, it doesn't talk to each other. And so what we're trying to do with the Open Water Data Initiative is at least have a platform in which these data sets can talk to each other and also tell a different story. The early iterations of this came from my assistant secretary at the time, Ann Castle, so there was leadership within the department to push towards an open data network. And part of it too is within our hallway, the Bureau of Reclamation and USGS even their data doesn't talk to each other. So we thought, how could we, really maximize our data sets and the different missions they have so that we can help support each of the agency's missions. So part of that was interacting with the Federal Geographic Data Committee and what's the other committees, ACWI, Water Information is the Committee on Water Information. So they have a shared subcommittee called the Geospatial Data, and under that is housed the Open Water Data Initiative. So we have monthly calls, and it's open to the public. We have, almost 40 people participating every month to talk about 4 use cases that we're doing. And the first use case is a National Flood Interoperability Experiment. It's being led by the Weather Service and USGS and FEMA. The second one, which I will talk to you more about specifically, is a drought use case, which is led by Interior, which is Reclamation and USGS. The third one is EPA, which is water quality, specifically a spill response, like what happened in West Virginia. And so every month we meet, we identify what data sets are out there, what is open data, and what we need to do to get it to a point that it's interoperable with each other. And part of that is also identifying the standards to which this data set needs to be held so that it is interoperable, which is really an important part of the discussion as well. What's a lot of fun with this process is we're using the lean startup method. I'm not sure if anyone's familiar with that, but the whole process of it is failing fast. And so what you have to do is find your minimum viable product, which I will show you shortly, and show what you can do with open data. And so what we came up with is the California visualization that we'll pull up in a little bit, and I can walk you through it. And what's so neat about that is this is all data that's already opened. Granted, it's using technology that's scraping instead of interoperable, but it is open. And we've done it on the GitHub system, so it's been forked, I think, over a dozen times. So it's pretty cool, and it has, each area has a place where you can go and actually get the data, because I think a lot of folks don't recognize the amount of data that's out there from the federal government. Before we even got there, and before we even were able to roll out the California Drought Visualization, we had strong leadership from the administration, we had strong leadership from the department, but we also needed to show value to the agencies as far as how this fit into their mission. And so by creating this minimum viable product with the California visualization, we were able to tap into really what is a crux of our policy discussion right now, which is the California drought. And by putting the data sets from NOAA, from USGS, from Reclamation, and from the state in a visualization that's never been done before, we were able to tell a story that hasn't been told with data before now. There's obviously some iterations that we need to make, and that's what we're doing with our MVP Point 2, which is the Lower Colorado region drought visualization that we plan to roll out at the end of this year. But at the end of this, our hope is that we create a decision support system for the Bureau of Reclamation, specifically on how they can best manage their projects in times of drought, and also maximize our partnerships with different agencies. And so it's been really exciting. I wouldn't call it a success story quite yet, but it is. It's been a lot of fun to work on this through the Department of the Interior. And coming from the Hill, they told me, you're going into administration, it's a bureaucracy, you're not going to get anything done. And I'd like to say that's wrong, because there are a lot of people who do see the value of this. You do have to find the data geeks who speak this language, and then be able to then tell the other people who don't speak the language, show them what you can do with data. And so that's what's really exciting. And if I could just quickly walk through, you can just scroll and I can narrate if you don't. So this is the California visualization. So it scrolls. sure does. It's really cool. So this is the drought, and this is reservoir levels. And so the bubbles correspond to the reservoir levels. And as you keep scrolling, scrolling. Oops. It missed.
I was scrolling very vigorously.
Oh. I think you gotta scroll back up. Because what it should be showing, and it's not, this should be along, the colors aren't showing, but this is the drought. So the red is the drought, and that's NOAA data on reservoir level data, which is state and reclamation. So it's never been shown before in this way. And so then you keep scrolling, and this is Landsat data, which is USGS data collected from satellites that shows the different changes in the reservoirs. This is the biggest reservoir in California, which is the Shasta Reservoir, which is the main reservoir we have at the top. Keep scrolling. See, and then there's the you can keep scrolling.
Okay.
You can just keep scrolling. Here's another data, but I think this is really neat to see, to get the data point here so that you can go to the data source. In this case, it's NRCS, SNOTEL data, and utilize it to your own advantage or use it for other.
Can you show us how that would work? Click on
Let me just click on it. So again, this is on an open source platform, GitHub, so it shows you all of the data sources here.
How many entities contributed data sets?
Well, there's NRCS, there's NOAA, there's Interior, which includes USGS and Reclamation. There's the state of California data. So I mean, I think there's about 4 or 5 different agencies. But the challenge here again is that this is being scraped. So at this point, it's not all interoperable, but we needed to be able to show what the value is in open data. And this is pretty powerful. And it's really cool that that it's been forked a couple times, so people are using it as thesis, or the state's using it for other purposes. And I'm learning all this lingo hanging out with the coders. That it's all publicly accessible data, and it's all data that's provided by the taxpayer. So we're pretty excited. So we're hoping the next phase of this will not just be California, but California, Nevada, and Arizona, and in the last 100 miles of the Colorado River. And we're hoping to release that in December. So, thank you.
Fantastic, that's great. Camille, I think one of the things that caught my attention when you were speaking is, on the one hand, I think with the Data Act, we're focusing on trying to get more data out into the public realm, but it is true that there is a lot of federal data that's currently available, but that doesn't mean it's in a structure that you want to have anything to do with it. I mean, it can be really painful to work with, and so developing these tools to not just make a giant spreadsheet available, but to actually tell a story along with it. It's really compelling. Well, Rick, I'd love it if you would talk a little bit about your project.
Okay. So as I said before, I'm the program manager for Recreation One Stop, which is an interagency program that provides recreation travel planning information for federal lands and federal recreational areas. It also provides a reservation service for over 3,000 different campgrounds and various tours and permits and activities that you can do on federal lands. And so to open data, prior to, back in 2002, the National Park Service had a reservation system, the U.S. Forest Service and the Army Corps of Engineers had a reservation system. Various locations had their own, and at that time OMB looked at it and said, this is redundant, you should put these together. And little did we know, there was this other website called recreation.gov that existed that actually started aggregating recreation data from all of the agencies in the late 1990s for the sole purpose of sharing it. Granted, it was it was kind of rudimentary at the time. The amount of data, the data structure of fields were pretty limited to like a description, an address, and a few other characteristics, but it did exist. And at the time we put the Park Service together with the Forest Service and the Army Corps, we also pulled in recreation.gov and adopted their name because it was more, crossed all the lines. And then admittedly, I was a low man in the totem pole in the program then. I didn't really know much about this recreation information database, and granted, I pretty much ignored it for a number of years. I didn't know if anyone was using it or what value it was. In 2011, 2012, when the America's Great Outdoors report came out and the National Travel and Tourism Strategy, both of those reports recognized recreation.gov as a logical place to aggregate tourism data on federal recreation. And we said, hey, we've already got that. And so we decided to take a look at it and start enhancing it. So the first challenge that we crossed was, how do we get the agencies to enhance this data? And that's a challenge we still face today. It's probably our biggest challenge. Because our leadership was on board. They said, this is a good idea. What can you do to enhance the sharing of it, but what are we going to do to get the data populated? There was huge gaps. There was a push by the Federal Interagency Council on Outdoor Recreation to the agencies to address the data gaps and spend some time, but literally we got probably a 15 to 20% return on actual improvements. So this is an ongoing thing we face. I think you would see the program is managed by a representative from each of the 7 agencies that participate in the reservation service, which includes the Corps of Engineers, Forest Service, Park Service, BLM, Bureau of Reclamation, Fish and Wildlife, and the National Archives and Records Administration, because we provide them tickets for the archives tours today. And they meet regularly, and they discuss these, and they have a strong commitment to really improving recreation.gov one step at a time and continuously doing it. And when the executive order on open data came out, we looked at it. It didn't seem to apply retroactively, but we saw the value in it. So the next thing we did was we started developing the technology to use JSON and adding CSV files so that people could do more than just a single XML download of all of this data and then spend all of their time parsing through it. We added additional filters to make sharing that data easier. So the state of Oregon could pull just Oregon data, or they could just pull Park Service data, whatever it suited them. And then we did a little redirection. We had a meeting with our management. We had funding that was directed at some projects with the data. We decided to redirect that to develop the front end and back end APIs on the Ruby to make it much more friendly. I hope. If I can ask some of the people here, because I've been working with a few people in this room just recently on the new API that was released in March. I think finally what we did was on April 11th and 12th, just a week and a half ago, we hosted a hackathon with the Department of the Interior at DOI to expose this new API and see what folks could come up with. And again, some of these guys right here from Booz Allen Hamilton were there, and over the course of 2 days, we had 11 presentations on different products that came out of this open data. And to our leadership that was present, it was eye-opening that you could actually do something fun and different with our data in as little as 48 hours. And I think having something to demonstrate the power of open data is going to be key in us moving forward, because I think it was really hard to visualize what would people do with this, and so our next step, and our biggest challenge again, is we're going back and we're actually addressing this as we speak, is to go out and find those data gaps and put a deadline on them of next month to fill in as many as we can. One of the developers, a trail guy, just quickly pulled together a world map, and we found that we had a national monument located on the east coast of India, a number of campgrounds out in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, and it's all because their data was incorrect. And so as people start using our data, these things become more exposed. It highlights the importance of that. So I think that is going to be our #1 tool, is really demonstrating the power that you have there. Okay.
No, that was fantastic. It's interesting, Rick and Camille, you both sort of hinted at one of those cultural change themes that I keep hearing, and that is sort of early success